Okay.
Hi, Rose. Thank you so
Hi.
much for being here and meeting with me today.
Absolutely my pleasure.
Yeah, I'm so excited to just hear a little bit more from you about your career and the path that it took for you to get here. And so we'll get started with my first question, which is just to find out from you what interested you in the counseling profession, and how did you first get into it?
Yeah, well, I mean, I've always had a fascination by human potential and human consciousness and what makes people, behave the way they do. That's always been a lifelong passion. So I started out as a teenager studying consciousness and the Vedic sciences, and then dived very deeply into that experience and study, and that was my career. Basically, I was in the 1980s a meditation teacher, and then got into Ayurveda. But then after my divorce, back in, let's see, I think 1989, 1990, I a friend of mine invited me to something that was created by what's called the Mankind Project. And there's a men's wing and then there's a women's wing.
Hmm.
So the men's wing, a lot of people, it's men's work, which is the new warrior, or they have like a new warrior weekend. And then for women, it's like the women within kind of wing. So I
Hmm.
went on that. It was like a weekend in like a group with a group. And a friend of mine suggested I do this because I was going through a difficult time with my divorce. And it was the first time I was introduced to shadow work. And so I had to do my own piece of shadow work. And it's very introspective and very revealing, and had to face kind of a fear of mine on that weekend. And it was really powerful. So I just started studying shadow work, and with Cliff Berry in Boulder, Colorado, who is the founder of not the Mankind. He's one of the founders of the Mankind Project, but he has a whole shadow work organization. So yeah, I realized that the Vedic sciences weren't complete, because it wasn't helping me enough through my divorce and what led to that divorce. So I felt like it would be more integrative to also study the human shadow, like our unconscious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've read a little bit about your history just because I did that Ayurveda program with you, and I never realized that you did the Ayurveda first in your
Oh,
and that you did the counseling second. I
yeah.
had imagined it the other way around. So
Oh, yeah,
that,
interesting. Well, yeah, it's kind of like you too. You've been a yoga teacher in Ayurveda. So, yeah, I didn't go back to school until in my 50s. I graduated
oh,
like, I think at age, I went to Pacifica Graduate Institute,
mhm.
and graduated in 2017. So, yeah, this is a very
Oh,
second part of my life.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
Do you feel that it is easier to market yourself as a counselor or easier to market yourself as an Ayurvedic practitioner?
Yeah. It just, I mean, I think it's just easier when someone asks me what I do. I just say I'm a therapist, and then I also integrate holistic medicine,
Yeah.
because most of the people here in the Midwest, if I say the word Ayurveda, they just draw a blank. They don't understand. So I usually just say holistic medicine practitioner, and I do holistic counseling and therapy. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
So
thank you for sharing that part of your history and just talking a little bit about what personally got you into counseling. I think that for a lot of us, that's probably part of the story, is that we experience therapy, or just, experience compassionate people who know how to, look and listen deeply. And then we feel the calling then to do that
Right.
when we
Yeah.
heal. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it was through my own pain that made me look at my own self. And it's part of the path of spirituality too, so
Mhm.
it was like the next step to go a little bit deeper for sure. Yeah.
I'm curious because, Ayurveda does have so much spirituality woven through it. And uh, there are such, daily rituals that have such a richness, and I can imagine ways. I'd like to hear from you a little bit more about how you weave all of that together with a counseling session.
Yeah, that's a good question. So it could be anything from, like, I'll give you an example, like somebody uh, who was a client who had a lot of anger and irritability and kind of like short-temperedness with their family members, and so I want to know if there's something physiologically, not just psychologically, what is happening. So I look at the whole person. So I think said he was having like all these, what are those energy drinks, like the um I
Like,
don't know what
I know what
kind.
you're talking about. Yeah, the crazy ones that are like
Yeah, and he was
flowers of
having
green.
5 of those a day, which can really agitate the system, and a lot of spicy food and skipping meals, which in Ayurveda is fire element pitta, as you know. So,
Mhm.
I wanted to, so I told him, I informed them, like, my background is Ayurvedic medicine, and part of the agitation you're constantly feeling sounds like there's a lot of physiological things happening with increased fire element, and this is what I recommend for you to balance that, stop having those energy drinks, which are very agitating for the nervous system. Don't skip meals, have more soothing, cooling foods. And it was really different for him. He had never heard of this before, but he did it, and he was much, much calmer, um, as a result of it, not as reactive. So like it made a huge difference. Whereas, the body and the acidity of the body affects the mind body connection. Or it might be that I recommend people to meditate. Sometimes I refer people to go learn transcendental meditation because that was my background. I won't, sometimes I'll teach another type of meditation for calming, like a mindfulness experience, or even show them how to take their pulse for self pulse. I've had so much success with people who are having a panic attack or anxiety attack, where I
Mm.
show there's a technique in Ayurveda where you just feel your own pulse. So I do that often because sometimes people can't meditate because they're just too overwhelmed to close their eyes and relax. But anybody can feel their pulse with the 3 fingers. And then that becomes kind of a part of their daily routine if they have panic attacks. So those are some of the things that, there's many things in Ayurveda to incorporate, but those are a few samples, you could say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, just such simple and beautiful, techniques come out of this ancient practice. And sometimes it's just surprising how effective some things just as simple as tuning into your own pulse can be. And I know that you've taught that to me in
Right.
classes, and I've definitely used it, especially
Yeah. Oh, great.
not that
Yeah.
I've been having panic attacks, but just a
Yeah.
bit of anxiety sometimes in school, and in
Mhm.
being exposed a little bit more than usual.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. I mean, because it's mind, the whole focus, what I'm doing is mind body connection. So
Yeah.
if people are, the thing with suffering is when we become over identified with an external and an internal experience, we become overshadowed, that we become one with that pain. But when you connect with yourself on a deeper level, because the pulse is going beyond your thought. It's connecting with your whole nervous system, your whole body. So you're reconnecting with a deeper level of yourself, and so you're becoming self-referral, even for a second, a couple, even 1 minute. You don't have to take your pulse for long, even just for a minute. Then it creates like an experience of wholeness, even for like a fraction of a second. It gives you distance from that experience of pain or overwhelm. So
Yeah.
some more spaciousness there. And so it's just like you say, very simple, and it's natural, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. It's, I, I prefer it to the idea of, pharmaceutical or something like that.
Yeah.
But then speaking of that, you also incorporate herbs and recommend different types of, you know, herbal remedies at times.
Mhm.
And I'm wondering if you bring that into the counseling practice or if you just keep it kind of uh, over on the Ayurveda side for people who are learning that with you.
Yeah, well, there are, I mean, and I can't, as far as legal issues go, like I can do psychoeducation about some herbs like Brahmi, or if there's a sleep issue, I'll say, well, why don't you, there's research indicating that this Brahmi herb and Jatamansi help with sleep and anxiety. Check it out. But as
Yeah.
far as like our within the legal framework, you can't make a prescription or tell people not to take their prescribed medications, but you could do psychoeducation on it and see what they think about it,
Yeah.
if they want to incorporate that. But
So you
you
can
know,
converse about it, but it's definitely not prescribing.
correct.
It's
Yeah.
just discussing the natural, um, you know, element could be useful if they wanted to.
Yeah. I mean, so with my clients, some of them do take psychotropic medications, and some people need it. I'm not at all against it. And some people have side effects and they don't want to take it. So that's when I will say, why don't you take a look at this website, like, Banyan or Chandika or whatever, and look at these particular formulas, and see what you think. So that's how I do it, as more as a psychoeducation. Yeah.
Yeah. And speaking of psychoeducation, I'm really interested in that too, because, I have in my career with wellness facilitated a lot of, teacher trainings, and you're facilitating a lot of, these Ayurveda knowledge trainings. And uh, do they ever resemble group therapy to you? Do you feel that since there's a spiritual nature to the conversation, would you even say that it is in some ways an extension of therapy? Um,
To teach me.
yeah, yeah. Is it like more psychoeducation, or do you feel, how woven together do you feel that counseling and and your education through Ayurveda is? Do you consider Ayurveda psychoeducation?
Oh, yes. In
Okay.
the big picture, I would say yes, because going back to the Vedic literature, like the Bhagavad Gita is an ancient, literature of Ayurveda. And one of the quotes in there is, even just a little bit of this knowledge removes fear. So the study of Ayurveda is the study of the big self and the small self. It's the study of life. It's the science of life. So, and
Yeah.
it's ancient and eternal knowledge. Um, and it's not just, it's universal information. It's not just in India where Ayurveda comes from. These are universal principles about the laws of nature.
Yeah.
And that creates comfort and nourishment and a sense of safety. And the experience of Ayurveda is coming back to the self, coming back home to our own pure consciousness. And in that case, it's psychoeducational too, because we're learning about our own laws of nature, and that creates more wholeness in itself. Yeah. Great question. Yeah.
Thank you. I also feel like you have a special population, and just reading about your biography, and I know that you have highly sensitive people as clients, and I was just curious about how you ended up choosing that population to work with. Do you have other populations that you work with?
So I'm highly sensitive, and I tend to draw highly sensitive people to me. When I learned about it, highly sensitive, I don't know, it must have been 12, 15 years ago. I was so relieved to find out that there's other people out there like me, because we know the research by Dr. Elaine Aron, the research shows that only 20% of the population has high sensitivity. So high sensitivity is, empathic, and just, like the senses can get overstimulated. And and then I started kind of diving deep into that knowledge that from Dr. Elaine Aron, and just applied it in my practice. She actually has a training for therapists, which I can tell you about later. But so it seems like I don't try to get to work with HSP, but I do draw them in. We seem to draw each other together. It's definitely a tribe. But yes, I do also work with other people. Mostly I work with people who have anxiety, or they have like attachment issues, attachment trauma, and so I work with people who are having challenges with relationships, and life changes as well, like they're going through a divorce, or they're changing a career, and they need, their self-esteem issues, so they're trying to make changes. So I'm working with all kinds of people, but all of them tend to have some element of HSP, high sensitivity. So
besides working with a population of that is specialized, you also have, I know that you've traveled the world over, and you've lived internationally, and that a lot of people from all over the globe are attracted to Amritanam to study with you. And I'm curious about just a little bit more in the profession of counseling. I'm curious about how you view licensure. Like, how is that going? Do you have reciprocity with other states? Are you able to do telehealth in states outside of Illinois? I'd just love to hear that.
So no, I'm not licensed in other states, just Illinois. So I only do psychotherapy in the state of Illinois, but I do Ayurvedic coaching internationally. So
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that a bit of a challenge at times? Do you have to find referrals for people, and just, I'm sure people want to be counseled at times who are from all over.
I mean, the coaching is, like I just basically have people fill out an intake form, and if they need actually psychotherapy, then I will just tell them that they have to find a therapist in their area. And but if they want like Ayurveda, like the diet, nutrition, and lifestyle, and then that's what I'm offering.
So there's a little bit of a coaching and a counseling separation.
For sure. I have to do that. I have to stay within the boundaries of that. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's areas, I mean, it's useful for me to hear about, where the boundaries might be and where the crossovers can be as well.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the way you can do that is to just get like do an assessment, like by them filling out their intake form. So um if there's some red flags and that they need like weekly psychotherapy and they're outside of the state, then they have to be referred. But they can see you as an Ayurveda coach even if they have a therapist, so they could do both. It's not like you can't see
Right.
them. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Um, well, I wonder, I mean, I'll ask you, I think, I guess my last question really just is, what advice do you have for me going into or just starting out in this counseling profession, knowing a little bit about how, I hope to incorporate these things? And are there any sort of formal kind of methods or approaches out of, I guess the the counseling approaches that are there that are, in the science-based, that you would recommend I focus on while I'm studying?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'll tell you that the main thing that I have learned and experienced, and I hope to pass that on to you, and I'm super excited about what you're doing, is your own self-care and your own self-referral experience. So you're staying within your own self-referral consciousness while you're working with somebody, so you're staying in your own bliss. You don't move out of that, because you're going to hear some overwhelming things from people, and if you're highly sensitive, you're empathic, you know but you can maintain it's like your own inner boundary. As a highly sensitive person, you're maintaining your own self-awareness, and at the same time you're aware of the other person. This is what I learned at Pacifica Graduate Institute, but I also learned from my Ayurvedic teachers who may see 20 people in a day doing post-diagnosis. They just stay within their own self-referral bliss, you could say. And at the same time, they're helping people who are suffering. So you're doing two things at once. You're like the observer, and you're also engaging at the same time. So that way you don't get tired, because HSPs can get tired from working with people.
Yeah.
So you have to stay rested, eat right, not do too much extra things that are draining your energy, but to have have that simplicity and be available. So it's a kind of a dance, you could say. Yeah.
Well, I appreciate that advice, and I know that I will need to scale back on
Yeah.
the things that I'm doing right now in order to practice self-care. And I'm just so grateful that I got a chance to connect with you today, Rose, and just hear more about your path into the counseling career, and even just to get a little bit more clarity as to how you started out, and how you weave it all together, but also keep some of it apart. So that's
Yeah.
been
Yeah,
really cool.
absolutely.
Yeah.
All righty. Well, so great. Thank you so much for, asking me. I really appreciate it. And best wishes in your endeavors. And I think you're already a great therapist and healer. So just you're continuing going a little bit deeper. So that's great.
I so appreciate hearing that. Thank you, Rose. And I can't wait to connect with you again
Yes.
after this interview, outside of this interview, on our Ayurveda learning that I've been doing. And
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll follow up with you again soon. And
Okay, sounds
yeah,
great. Okay.
thank you. Have a wonderful day.
Here. Okay,
Thanks.
bye-bye.
Bye.